I'm Akira.
And you're watching
Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So clearly, the Mexican legends are not big fans of Canelo Alvarez's tour of Europe because they continue to go in and speak the truth when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, regardless of the backlash that they receive from racist Mexican fans. And when I mention racist Mexican fans, I'm mainly talking about the Mexicans that live in America. I've already completely broken this down in my last Canelo Alvarez video. There is a huge dichotomy between Mexicans that live in America and Mexicans. I'll reiterate the point a little bit later on. But for now, let's go ahead and get into what Erik Morales just said. Now, once again, keep in mind, all of the greatest Mexicans, they have been criticizing Canelo Alvarez for his level of competition, going all the way back to when he first fought for his world title against not Ricky Hatton, but Matthew Hatton. Matthew Hatton, for those of you guys who didn't know, he was a welterweight that wasn't even ranked in the top 10 as a welterweight, but all of a sudden, he ended up fighting Canelo Alvarez at super welterweight for a world title. A fighter that did absolutely nothing to deserve a title shot, he ended up getting one against Canelo Alvarez. Sound familiar? It should, because that's extremely analogous to what happened with the Yildirim situation with Canelo. You had a fighter who was coming off of a loss. How would a fighter that's coming off of a loss and has been inactive for 2 years be in position to fight for a world title? It's because Canelo Alvarez runs the WBC, and he contacted the WBC, requested to fight Yildirim once the real champion, David Benavidez, was stripped of his title. Now, just for the people that aren't too familiar with this story, originally Canelo Alvarez was supposed to fight for the super middleweight world title against Yildirim, but because DAZN felt it was such a huge mismatch, they rejected the fight. And this is what led to Canelo Alvarez to pout and slap his knee and tell them, well, if I can't fight Yildirim and who I want to fight, I'm going to leave DAZN, right? And Golden Boy. And this is exactly what happened. So DAZN and Golden Boy, they let Canelo Alvarez go. He's now a free agent. But then because DAZN still wants to make money with Canelo Alvarez, they signed a 2-fight deal with him, which includes Yildirim, which blows my mind because we all know, and that fight was on pay-per-view. And we all know that fight is not going to do any numbers at all, which also proves that Canelo Alvarez is not the biggest star in boxing. Because even when Floyd Mayweather was fighting Andre Berto, which was his weakest pay-per-view card, even that card did 550,000 pay-per-views, over 500,000, right? Canelo, when you're a superstar, when you're the face of boxing, even when you fight a complete no-name, you should still be able to do decent pay-per-view numbers. But we know that the numbers, which they're not going to release, are completely trash. And that's why they're not going to release the numbers, because it's going to be embarrassing. Just like they didn't release the pay-per-view numbers for the Caleb Smith fight, which was a better fight than this one. But the numbers were most likely still horrible, because of the fact that no one really knew who Canelo was, who Caleb Smith was in the States. Now, see, guys, all of those facts that I just stated right there that are completely irrefutable, that is going to completely hurt the Canelo Alvarez fans' feelings, mainly the ones that live in America. But what makes it worse for these type of fans is it's not just me saying this. All of the Mexican greats are saying the exact same things that I've been saying, because it is the truth. Unfortunately, these Mexican greats, they're not racist. They're not going to be biased. They're not going to be forced to stay on code just to make some damn internet fans feel better about the situation. Which brings us into the topic of discussion. So after Canelo Alvarez completely blows out Yildirim in the third round, Erik Morales, he says Canelo is not a technical boxer. He said Spence and Crawford are much better, end quote. Now I'm going to put the link to the interview in the description box so you guys can go ahead and watch it. Now guys, let me start off by saying this. Because what Erik Morales said was in a complete Spanish interview, there was no translation or anything, I decided to scroll to the comments to get a little bit more verification and confirmation of what Erik said about Canelo versus Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford. And soon as I scrolled down, that's all you seen was people in English responding, saying, how dare Erik Morales say that Crawford and Spence is better? You know, he's a hater and he's jealous and et cetera, et cetera. The whole comment section was flooded with comments like this. Once again, these were comments in English. These were most likely a lot of Mexican fans in America, as I pointed out earlier. Now, let me go ahead and share a story with you guys just to further hammer the point that I'm about to make. I remember years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, I interviewed trainer Joel Diaz. For those of you guys who don't know, Joel Diaz was Tim Bradley's original longtime trainer before Tim Bradley left and went with Teddy Atlas. I interviewed him, and Joel, he told me a really interesting story. He told me when they were preparing and training, getting ready for the Juan Manuel Marquez fight, Joel Diaz, he ran into one of his Mexican friends, right? Associates or whatnot. And the guy, he wanted to bet Joel that Marquez was going to beat his fighter, Tim Bradley, right? So Joel said, okay, let's bet. After Tim Bradley beat Marquez, the guy, he comes back, he pays Joel his money, but then he says to Joel, he said, I just don't understand. You're Mexican. How could you possibly go against the Mexican? This guy is saying this to Tim Bradley's trainer. He's saying, how could you go against the Mexican when Joel Diaz trains Tim Bradley, right? So Joel is like, you got to understand, man, I've been training this kid since he was like 13 years old. He's like family to me. And the Mexican guy just shook his head and he just walked away. That Mexican fan didn't care how close Joel Diaz was to Tim Bradley. I mean, he wouldn't have cared if Tim Bradley was Joel Diaz's stepson. None of that would have mattered. The fact that it was a Mexican involved, that Tim Bradley was fighting, was the only thing that mattered. He made it clear it was about race first, no matter who you train. Now, guys, just think for a second. Imagine if you were black fighting against a Mexican fighter, and this guy right here was your trainer. The guy who's always going to go for the Mexican, even if he's working with a black fighter. Guys, this is the type of loyalty that we're dealing with when we're talking about Mexican American fans as opposed to Mexican fans from Mexico. Matter of fact, I have a more personal story that I can share with you guys. My sons, both of my sons box. I used to box. Both of my sons, they box. Now, my younger son, he actually went really far, especially considering the fact that he was never training 100%. He was a 2-time national champion, and he would have been like a 8 or 10-time national champion if he would have been fighting in more tournaments, if he would have been fighting more, period. See, Remy, he's the type of natural talent where sometimes he would only train for like 2 weeks and win a whole national tournament just off of his natural talent. That's how good he is. And my older son was really good too, but he just stopped boxing a lot early. If you guys haven't seen him on YouTube, you guys can look him up. Matter of fact, you guys can find one of his biggest sparring sessions at the Mayweather gym, sparring against Floyd Mayweather's senior son, not son, one of the kids that he was training. My son stopped him in the first round. All you have to do is look up my series, Spar Wars, my son versus Floyd Mayweather's boy, or something like that. It'll pop up. There's also footage on the internet of my son sparring with Fernando Vargas' son, Armando Vargas, the one I think he just turned pro. I know Fernando Vargas Jr. just turned pro, and I think Armando is about to turn pro as well if he hasn't already. But when they sparred, keep in mind, my son was 14, Armando was 16, and my son was much smaller and shorter than him. And let's just say he did so well that Fernando Vargas's people, they reached out and they told me, or they asked me if I could take the sparring down. And I did put the sparring footage on private, but I'm about to go ahead and put it on public now because it's been on private for some years. So anyway, so with Remy training in Las Vegas and me knowing everyone in Las Vegas, knowing all the trainers, all the fighters, I decided to have Remy work with this Mexican trainer who I thought was really cool. This guy turned out to be an extreme racist, surprisingly. But I didn't find any of this out till later on, obviously. But, you know, we would have these conversations where he would say certain things that didn't make sense. Just one, for example. I mean, there were more extreme things, but one that really stood out is Remy, he had a fight in San Diego, right? So we had to travel to San Diego, and the trainer is telling me that this kid, he's really good. He's supposed to be like, you know, a little star in this gym. It was a Mexican kid, right? So we went out there and Remy fought this kid. Remy beat him easy. So after the fight, after the trainer completely built this kid up, then all of a sudden, when he sees my family members and everyone kind of celebrating, congratulating Remy, that's when all of a sudden he comes out of nowhere and he says, yeah, but the kid wasn't really all that good though. You know, it's kind of like Gervonta Tank Davis knocking out Leo Santa Cruz. Imagine if Gervonta had a Mexican trainer and the trainer says, yeah, you knocked him out, but he was too small for you. He was too small for you. Or if Gervonta, he ends up knocking out a much bigger Mario Barrios, and your own trainer, imagine your own trainer saying to you, yeah, man, but he's not the real champion. He's not the best at 140. This is pretty much what this trainer did when it came to my son, trying to downplay my son's win because my son is happy and all of us are happy that he won the fight, which is a normal reaction. Now, needless to say, that's the last time he ever trained my son. But what's really interesting is he has two sons that are twins. And you guys have probably seen them if you are diehard boxing fans. They're twins that just turned pro. Matter of fact, the media was starting to promote them like they were the new version of the Charlo twins. Like they were basically like the Mexican version of the Charlo twins coming up. But unfortunately for them, one of them just suffered their first loss on TV. I believe it was on PBC. No need to say their names, but you guys see the point. This is the reason why you're going to get so many Mexican fans in the comment section saying, oh, Morales is just jealous, and Chavez and Morales and Barrera and every other Mexican fighter that has said something negative about Canelo, they're just jealous. They say crazy, ridiculous stuff like, oh, they're jealous that he's going to become the biggest Mexican fighter ever over Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. Let me tell you guys why none of this stuff even makes sense, just for argument's sake. First of all, if they're going to be jealous of Canelo Alvarez, why would you be jealous when Canelo Alvarez is looking his worst? He's being criticized by the whole boxing world. Why would you be jealous of him fighting against a cherry-picked Yildirim that just came off of a loss? If you were going to be jealous of Canelo Alvarez, wouldn't it make more sense for you to be jealous if he was fighting against the most dangerous fighter in the sport and beating him decisively with no controversy? It would make more sense to be jealous of him after he gets a Golovkin win. But all of these Mexican greats, they criticize Canelo more when he fought Yildirim than when he fought Golovkin. So that means this obviously has nothing to do with hating. You don't hate someone because they buy some old beat up hoopty from the lot. Usually if you're gonna hate on someone, it's because they bought a nice car, right? That BMW, the car that you want. You're not jealous of somebody for beating someone that Chavez can come out of retirement and beat. And that's crazy because if you think about it, I bet you Chavez could beat Yildirim. I bet you Morales, for sure Morales, he's even younger. We know Morales could beat Yildirim right now. He could train for 1 month and beat Yildirim. So why would Morales be jealous of Canelo? This is what Mexican fans are really saying. What Mexican fans are really saying is, yeah, we all know you're telling the truth, but you're not supposed to go out there and say it, dummy. You're Mexican, remember? Just like the Mexican fan said to Joel Diaz, you're Mexican. It doesn't matter if Canelo is cherry picking. We're supposed to be on code. You are going off code by sitting over here telling people the truth. All you're doing now is proving that damn black bastard Dante was right. You know, speaking of that, this reminds me of something that happened with my ex-girl. You know how you always get into these type of arguments, disagreements with your girl. A girl, you know, she never wants to be wrong. The funny thing is, sometime when my girl was dead wrong, she would never admit it, of course. But one of her sisters would always agree with everything that I say. Like, that makes logical sense. She'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. I completely agree. So my sister-in-law at the time, she told me one day that her sister told her, don't be agreeing with Dante. Even if he's right, don't be agreeing with nothing he said because I don't want him to think that he's right. This is what she told me. So I found out that my girl had knew all along what I said made sense. She had knew all along she was wrong, but she had too much pride to admit it. And this is exactly what's happening with these Mexican American fans, mainly Mexican American fans, when it comes to Canelo Alvarez. They know that what he's doing looks horrible. They know that when Erik Morales points out certain things, says that, especially when he says stuff like Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence are better technical fighters, they know that may actually be true. But they don't want that to be put out there for people to hear. And they feel you have a responsibility as a Mexican to not say anything like that. By default, you're supposed to be biased. Now, listen, it's okay. Everyone has a bias. It's okay to be biased to a certain extent. But there's a difference from being biased and being racially biased. Okay? Now, if you're just biased because you watch the Olympics and you root for your country, that's a normal bias, right? But if you are trying to prevent the best fights from happening, if you have anger and hatred towards someone like Erik Morales for actually telling the truth, that's more of a racial bias, right? If you're discrediting the Charlo brothers or calling Jamal Charlo and his brother, calling them the Charlo sisters just because you're upset that they want to fight your favorite fighter, that's a racial bias right there. Listen, man, when I go to a live fight, I love to see different countries, throwing their flag up in the air as the fight is going on, the Mexican flag, the UK flag, the Irish flag, whatever country they're from. I like to see that, because it becomes a bigger type of event. But there's a difference from waving your own flag and cheering for your guy as opposed to throwing rocks at the other country or the other race that your guy is fighting against. You guys see what I'm talking about? And this is what we have a lot of in boxing. It's not just waving your flag, it's throwing rocks at the other team. Have you guys ever seen those comments from Mexican fans where they'll say something like, man, if Canelo Alvarez was black, you guys wouldn't be saying anything. Have any of you guys ever seen comments like that? That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard anybody say, or at least one of them. There's a lot of ridiculous stuff you hear when it comes to this boxing stuff. But it's so ridiculous because black fighters like Terrence Crawford, he's getting criticized more by, let's just say, a group of black people on YouTube than Canelo is. I mean, you got black people right now criticizing Terrence Crawford over the Sean Porter fight. We don't know if it's going to happen, but for a lot of black people that thought the fight wasn't going to happen, this is so funny when you think about it. Terrence Crawford wants to fight the guy that actually just beat Sean Porter. He doesn't want to fight the guy that just lost. He wants to fight the guy that just beat Sean Porter. And you have a lot of black people criticizing Terrence Crawford for that alone. Imagine if Terrence Crawford was doing what Canelo Alvarez just did. Imagine if Terrence Crawford was avoiding all of the black fighters. He was avoiding all of the tough Mexican fighters. And when I say all, I'm talking about the undefeated ones. I'm not just talking about some guaranteed win of a black fighter or a Mexican fighter, right? Imagine if Terrence Crawford was avoiding all of the top black and Mexican fighters, and he decided to fight someone who just came off of a loss, who just got knocked out before that, and has been inactive for 2 years. Forget about what the non-black fans will say. Imagine what a lot of black fans will say, period. And honestly, this is what makes black people so talented in all things that they do. Because black people are so competitive against each other. So that forces them to raise the bar even higher. Now, going back to Morales and all these other Mexican fighters supposedly hating on Canelo Alvarez, here's just more proof we know what time it is. When Canelo Alvarez even moved up to light heavyweight and fought Sergey Kovalev, even though that was somewhat of a cherry pick because he avoided the toughest competition in his own division to go fight the weakest champion who had already been knocked out before when it comes to Sergey Kovalev, right? But guess what? Erik Morales, Chavez, Barrera, Marquez, none of them criticized Canelo Alvarez for fighting Sergey Kovalev. Now, that doesn't mean other Mexican analysts from Mexico didn't criticize Canelo, but I'm just telling you, these guys who are being accused of hating on Canelo, they didn't say anything negative about the Sergey Kovalev fight, which tells you that these greats, they're just saying, damn, Canelo, at least meet us halfway. At least fight someone decent. You know what I'm saying? If you don't want to fight the toughest guys, at least, try to fool the public a little bit. Like you did with the Kovalev fight. This is what they're saying to Canelo. Something else I wanted to speak on, because I told you I would talk about this later on in this video. When I told you guys in my last video that Mexican fans from Mexico are nowhere near as racist as the majority, not all, but the vast majority of Mexicans that live in America. I got some comments from some Mexican fans saying, hey, that's not true because I like Terrence Crawford. I like Mike Tyson. I like Sugar Ray Leonard. Let me tell you guys something. It means absolutely nothing if the only time you're in the comment section telling people you like someone is to defend allegations of you possibly being a racist. Because if you're a Terrence Crawford fan, like you say, if you're an Errol Spence fan, like you say, how come I never see you in the comment section defending Errol Spence? How come you're never in the comment section saying, hey, that's not true what you guys are saying about Errol Spence? How come when Errol Spence gets a win, I never see you in the comment section saying congratulations like everyone else is doing? How come I never see you say, oh man, that was a great win. I can't wait to see him fight again? I don't ever see you guys. Only time I see you in the comment section is when you're defending allegations of you being a racist. Then I will see some comments where some Mexican fans would say, it's not true that Mexican Americans love Canelo. Mexicans actually hate Canelo. They hate him the most. Okay, so if that's true, then we should see this in the comment section, right? But we all know that once I drop this video, 99% of comments from Mexican fans are going to be defending Canelo Alvarez and attacking the black race because we're saying the same things that Mexicans like Erik Morales, Chavez, Marquez, and Barrera are saying. I mean, once again, you guys have to understand everything that I say is documented. It can be proven with documented facts. So you can't just post something in the comment section and say, hey, that's not true because I like Terrence Crawford, because I don't like Canelo, so everything you say is no longer true. That's not the way statistics works, guys. If I tell you that 85% of Americans love chocolate, you can't say, no, those statistics are wrong because I don't like chocolate. And this is how you fans sound. And for you fans that say, hey man, I'm Mexican and I'm not a racist, I like this guy and I like that guy. If you know in your heart you're not a racist, you don't have to tell people you're not a racist, right? I had already said not everyone, but the majority. And the reason why I say the majority, because once again, we can look at the comments and it can be proven. It can be statistically proven. But if you know you're not one of the racists, why start defending yourself as if you feel guilty? Because that's the way you look. You look guilty if you have to defend yourself. If I start talking about gay people right now, are you going to pop out in the comment section and be like, hey, I just want to let everybody know I'm not gay. I done banged a whole lot of chicks, etc., etc., etc. You're not going to do that, right? If you know you're not gay, you don't have to volunteer information that you're not gay. Just like if you know you're not a racist. Now, when Erik Morales says that Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence are better fighters, they're technically better fighters than Canelo Alvarez, they're just going to call Erik Morales jealous, right? They're going to call him a hater, they're going to call him jealous. But if a black person like myself says the exact same thing that Morales just said, then all of a sudden it's war, right? You black bastards this and you black that and black that. You see what I'm saying? So let's not act stupid and act like we don't see the racial divide that exists in the sport of boxing, okay? Because as hard as it is for you guys to hear this, it's absolutely true. Of course, Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence are technically better fighters than Canelo Alvarez. There's a reason why Canelo Alvarez did not want to fight Andrade, didn't want to fight Jamal Charlo. Imagine if Canelo Alvarez was in the same weight class as Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. Do you think he would have fought them? Absolutely not. But he'll fight them if they have to move up in weight. He'll definitely fight them if they have to move up 2 weight classes. That's the only time, at least right now, that's the only time we're going to see Canelo Alvarez in there with a very talented, undefeated black fighter, is if he has to move up 1 or 2 weight classes. Another misnomer is we keep hearing people say that Canelo Alvarez, he's gotten better since the Floyd Mayweather fight. That's why if he were to fight him again, he would beat Floyd Mayweather and all of this ridiculous nonsense. Listen, man, this is what I want you to do. Go back and watch Canelo versus Gennady Golovkin, watch the second fight. Go watch Canelo versus Sergey Kovalev. You know what you guys will notice in those fights? You will see Canelo Alvarez consistently, constantly getting hit with the same type of jab that Floyd Mayweather was hitting him with all night. Especially in the Golovkin fight, you will notice that Golovkin, the man that's supposed to be the bigger aggressor, he was actually doing a better job of boxing Canelo than Canelo did when Canelo tried to box Golovkin in the first fight. Golovkin was extremely effective with his jab in the rematch. He was extremely effective with counter right hands. I watched that fight the other day, and let me tell you, man, because I had thought that Canelo had won the fight. When I watched it the first or maybe the second time, I thought Canelo won the fight. But I went back to revisit it just because it's been so long since we've seen Canelo in a competitive fight. I just wanted to see him in a real fight. Went back and watched it and was surprised how easy it was for Golovkin to catch Canelo Alvarez with clean counter right hands, like counter right hands that Floyd Mayweather was landing. Jabs all night, uppercuts all night. I mean, he was able to almost land whatever he wanted to in that fight. So how are you going to sit here and say that Canelo got better when he's getting hit with the same exact type of punches? If Canelo had became a better fighter, he would have completely dominated Gennady Golovkin, because you got to remember, Golovkin is not as good as Floyd Mayweather. He's not as technical. He's not as smart as a Floyd Mayweather. So if Canelo has gotten better, how is he struggling against a guy that is not as good as Floyd Mayweather is? You guys, you see my point? How has Canelo gotten better when he's getting outboxed by a fighter who's not even a boxer by nature? Looking good against weak opposition does not make you a better fighter. Guys, you go back and you watch Canelo versus Austin Trout. And then you watch Canelo versus Erislandy Lara. Guys, we're seeing the same exact Canelo Alvarez. Once again, go watch Canelo versus Sergey Kovalev. Sergey Kovalev was starting to pull ahead on the cards before he got stopped in the 10th or the 11th round. And Sergey wasn't even fighting the way he was fighting Andre Ward. Imagine if Canelo was in there with that Sergey. But that's the reason why Canelo never fought that Sergey. For that exact reason. Guys, all I'm doing is telling you the exact same thing Erik Morales, Chavez, Marquez, or Barrera would be telling you right now if you guys were sitting down talking boxing. You may not like it when it's coming from a black person, but it is the complete truth. It logically makes sense. And there is nothing I said in this video you can tell me does not logically make sense. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, then this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called Errol Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to erroldequis.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram. Fellas, I've got some great news for you. If you've lost your hair or have a receding hairline, the time has come when you can finally get your hairline back through a process called scalp micropigmentation. So here's how it works. It's a hair tattoo that replicates the look of your hair follicles when you have fully shaved it down. So to get this hookup, make sure you follow and contact my man Scalp Carolinas on Instagram. Listen, I'm telling you guys right now, in the world that we live in today, one of the most important things in life to have is a good lawyer. And I can vouch for this one right here, because this brother is my personal lawyer. So if you need any type of legal representation, if you need legal advice, if you're having problems on YouTube, on your regular job, or whatever it is, contact lawyer, mediator, and business consultant Issa Israel's law firm. I've been knowing this man for a while, and he has been a true blessing to me. I'm telling you, he's affordable, he will work with you, but most importantly, he's not going to just treat you like a customer. He will have your best interest. So to get in contact with him, go to iilawfirm.com or consultsglobal.com.